Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another insightful conversation of our EY Sustainability podcast. My name is Nitesh Mehrotra, partner with EY Sustainability Tribe in EY. And as some of you and hopefully most of you know, our purpose here is to share inspiring stories on sustainable change management and how leading enterprises are creating value for their stakeholders. Also, we want to talk a little bit about the challenges and interdependencies that this transformation journey is highlighting for all of us. Uh, my guest today is Gayatri Divecha, the head of sustainability and corporate social responsibility at Godrej, one of India's diversified business conglomerate. With a dynamic and visionary leadership, Gayatri has been at the forefront of driving sustainability in action and implementing sustainability initiative within Godrej. Welcome to the podcast, Gayatri.
Hi, thank you, Nitesh. Thank you for having me here on this.
Pleasure, Gayatri. Thank you. So, Gayatri, let me just kick off quickly. The first one, Gayatri, that I want to talk a little bit about in terms of infusing business with sustainability and specifically focusing on sector and sustainability intelligence. And as a large conglomerate with diverse businesses, how, in your view, do we need to approach the complex sustainability challenges which are unique to sector such as consumer products and building construction that you have? So how do you bring it all together so that the two can talk to each other and we are able to understand and relate the interdependency and interconnectedness of the business with sustainability?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right, Nitesh, it's a very complex canvas. I think sometimes we complexify it more than we need to. I'd say that, the further along one gets in a sustainability journey as a company, whether that's a, in standalone company or a conglomerate, the more complex it does become. More, there are more complex challenges that come up. There are much harder things to solve for, and so on. But if we are at the beginning of our sustainability journey, I think that what is key is to, is to really keep it as simple as possible and as close to the ethos of sustainability as possible. Now, sustainability it's actually quite simple, right? ESG, it's about what is our impact on the planet, what is our impact on people, and how are we governing this impact and our business at large. So I think if we start off from a simple place of, planet, what amount of water do we use? What is our water pollution looking like? What are our emissions? What kind of energy are we using? How much waste are we sending to landfill? Are we recycling? These are really simple questions that one doesn't need to be an expert at to answer, right? So I think sticking to the basics when one starts, and now we are quite far in the sustainability, the sort of worldwide narrative. There's a lot of information out there. There are many frameworks. There's all kinds of indicators available that one can refer to. But I think asking ourselves the basic foundational questions: what and how are we polluting? How are we treating human beings? And who is looking into all of this? Our emissions, whatever kind of pollution we have, and and our people processes or our treatment of people, whether that's communities, employees, shareholders, or consumers. I think the simpler the questions, the easier. You're right that there is there are broad frameworks available. There's a lot that is, globally acceptable, that is not necessarily as relevant for, markets like India or other markets in Asia. That's fine, because there's a lot of stuff that exists in India and in other Asian countries as well that are specific to these countries. So I think we should also, not try to boil the ocean and focus on, everything that a company, let's say, in one part of the world is focusing on. We should also just sort of bring things back to where are we located? Is there anything in place in our countries? Have regulators mandated certain principles of responsible business, for example, in India, right, that we can refer to. So I think that one needs to bring it back to where we are physically present. The other piece is around sectors, right? There is fundamentally a difference between real estate and between consumer products, between different kinds of agribusinesses. We have a very large and diversified agribusiness, which in itself is like a conglomerate, right? There's dairy, animal feed, crop protection, seeds, oil palm plantations in India. And the sustainability challenges and opportunities of each of these are quite different. That being said, there are overarching sort of themes, right? In every human action has some form of emission associated with it, right? For some, it may be more thermal energy that is creating an emission. For some, it might be electrical. For some, the emissions, in the immediate control may not be that high. So there are certain specificities, but there is a broad theme that can connect everything together. We need energy to power all of human existence and economic activity. Where is that energy coming from? Is it renewable? Is it not renewable? These sorts of things, despite the fact that there are specificities to each sector, there are these overarching themes as well. Same with human rights. Human rights are human rights, regardless of which sector we're working in. What are the sort of gaps? What are the risks? Those might shift a little bit, but the need to focus on human rights remains true for everything that involves all value chains that involve human beings. So, I think there's enough in common, while there's also enough to be specific about. And again, there's a lot of information out there, many primers that, organizations have written on ESG priorities for different sectors.
No, thank you, Gayatri. And I think I completely agree with your point on simplification. And I think that's the same that we tell all our practitioners. The more we simplify, I think the better. I also like the point, Gayatri, that you alluded to, is that listening to your stakeholders eventually gives you the right perspective from your business. And obviously, as we all know, sustainability is more about actively engaging with your stakeholders. So absolutely, couldn't agree more, Gayatri, and thank you for that perspective. So shifting a little bit, Gayatri, the next one that I want to focus on is obviously governance tone at the top, and how do we manage this complex program? And, as I always say, environmental and social are, goals. Governance is how we get here, right? So when you look at governance and the framework that you've set up, how does it look, what is done at the group level versus entities that you talked a little bit about? And how do you ensure in such a large conglomerate and a setup which is diversified that everyone is coordinated and collaborating, for leading practices and learning across the group entities?
Yeah, it's not always easy, this second part of your question, ensuring coordination and, everyone's alignment and, everybody working in the same direction. The larger the company, the larger the conglomerate, the more complicated it becomes. There are obviously inherent challenges in that, but, I think we've been able to manage it quite well so far at Godrej Industries Limited and associate companies. We're a group of 6 companies, 4 of which are publicly listed and 2 of which are privately held. We have something called a group management committee, which governs this group of 6 companies and all aspects of it, including ESG. So the GMC or Group Management Committee meets frequently. I think they meet every month, and then there are presentations on various aspects of business across the group, including ESG and CSR. Sometimes we do deep dives into ESG and CSR, and ultimately the GMC is the body that has approved and signed off all of our long-term ambition, goals, plans, strategies, etc. So our current 5-year plan, which is 22 to FY26, is an example, and then thinking longer term thinking around what do we do beyond that, again is signed off by the GMC, and it consists of the MDs of all of our group companies as well as the promoters of the group. So that is very helpful because it's right at the very top of governance of our group. And so we have their sponsorship, and we have, more importantly for us as a sustainability team, we have their feedback, their guidance, and they challenge us, which is what we need, and they challenge businesses. Thereafter we've got each of the group companies has their own board of directors, and has a sustainability or ESG committee, which is a subcommittee of the board. Same way that CSR is regulated in India to have a CSR committee, we've taken a call to also have a separate ESG committee at the board level. That way, directors, including promoters, MD, etc., and independent directors, have visibility into our sustainability, have decision making on our strategies, can assess sustainability risk at the highest level, and can be accountable to our shareholders and other stakeholders. So for us, those ESG committees are really important. We then make sure that all management committees of each, or executive committees, as they're called in some of our businesses, of each of the businesses, have again visibility and oversight on ESG. All of our ESG, we've managed to, so we did this top-down approach really in the past. I'd say, with this top-down approach, we strengthened it really in the past 3-4 years. We've started off by building bottom up, right? Ensuring that every factory, at least for our emissions reduction, all of our green initiatives, emissions reduction, water and so on, waste, renewables, we ensured that every single factory had somebody who was responsible, and every single factory head had this as part of their KRAs, improving our energy efficiency, increasing our renewables, reducing our use of water, and so on. So we actually built it bottom up. At that point, obviously the heads of manufacturing of each of our manufacturing companies also had KRAs, that along these lines, and then we would have a green council that would meet every couple of quarters or so, sometimes every quarter, and we'd have updates from all the regions, all the group companies, all their regions on what initiatives they had taken. And again, this was chaired by one of our promoters. So we built it sort of bottom up, and then we said, okay, now we need to ensure that this is going, when we realized that our sustainability journey was had to be more than improvements in our emissions and in our manufacturing processes. When we realized that we had to pivot from process to product, then there was also this realization that for each group company, sustainability had to be more sort of visible to and governed by each company's management committee. So that's how we went at it, and then obviously built the board committees and so on. So for us, it's really at every single level of our group companies. There's even if you look at an example is good example is GCPL, which is a MNC now, and has operations in Indonesia, Latin America, the African continent, and of course India and neighboring countries. All of these, are clusters, right? India is one cluster, LATAM is another one. Within India, there are sub-clusters. Same story in Africa. Africa is one cluster, but within that, there are different markets. At every level, there's, sustainability has been embedded, whether it's human rights assessments that is being held by HR teams, whether it's emissions reduction that's being held by factory teams, or plastics improvements, which is being held by packaging and R&D teams. So it's literally at every single level that this exists. And we found that, creating this huge matrix is incredibly important, because I keep saying this, and I feel really proud to be associated with a group where this is a reality, that ESG is not the sustainability team's job, right? If that's the case, then we are failing, right? ESG is everybody's job. Every single department, every team, every business has a stake in ESG. And if we are able to deliver on that, that's when we're really successful in a authentic sort of manner, where we're not greenwashing and, sort of putting out things that aren't necessarily accurate. So, that's how we think about it. And without this matrix, it's very difficult to stay true to that ethos. I'd just like to, sort of add one more thing, right, on this governance piece. It's great to have governance, but without the right kinds of values in place, that governance also becomes a checkmark exercise, right? What are our values when it comes to how we do business? Are those same are we ensuring those same values are how we're going about our ESG journey and progress? This is I can't tell you how important this is. We all know that ESG has become the flavor of the, I'd say, decade maybe. But can we, we there it is imperative that we do this in the correct manner, right? Because the effects of climate change are real, they're there, and not doing it inauthentically is not on in a way that's not values based is really not going to help the climate crisis. Then we're better off just not doing anything. So I'd say governance, yes, the right structure, but without values, it doesn't go anywhere.
No, guys, we can't agree more. And I think I love the way you said two things that really resonated. One is how can our values create value? Eventually, that's what this journey is all about, and ultimately is about our values. And I think second thing that I really liked is sustainability is everyone's business, right? Because as you rightly mentioned, it's embedded in everything that you do, and I think it's great to hear the journey evolving both top down and bottom up, and certainly, as you said, sustainability committee at the board level does set the right tone at the top. But eventually, I think it's absolutely, I think everyone right from the boardroom to the entire watchman kind of following the same value system. And I think that's certainly a leading practice that we're seeing. So it's good to know. And also, I think the point that you talked about embedding KRAs, because that's very, very important. Eventually, people behave as per what their KPIs are, right? So I think if we can instill the right balanced scorecard, to your point, then I think that kind of makes it a little bit easy operationally. Oh, that's fantastic. And so, Gayatri, moving on, talking a little bit about, digitization, the role of data, and obviously we all know it can be a competitive differentiation. And also, I think a great enabler for trust creation. I think you alluded to greenwashing, right? So that how do we have a single version of truth and traceability of the data? So talk us a little bit about how digitalization, data, tech, whichever name called, how is that getting? How is sustainability getting embedded in that? And what are some of the examples, if you could quote for some of for our listeners, that'll be great. That how is it enabling you to accelerate your sustainability-led transformation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, really, honestly, Nitesh, $1 million question, right? Because, ultimately we can only make the right decisions about sustainability if we have access to, high quality, robust, data sets that are also wide enough, right? Sustainability is a big space. There are considerations like, where is, a derivative of an oil, where is the oil, where is that oil being grown in the world, and how many, sort of how far has it come, how many sort of hands and businesses has it passed through? This question of traceability of really complex global supply chains, especially with things commodities. It's a really hard problem to solve for. Even things like our scope 3 emissions. Obviously because it's connected to what we're purchasing, but also what is what are the scope 1 and 2 emissions of our suppliers, because that's our scope 3. Things, these are really difficult sort of things to get accurate and high quality data for. That being said, again, I feel like we need to sort of start with what is in our immediate control, right? There's and things like What are we purchasing in terms of volumes? That helps because there are emission factors that we can use. What kinds of how do we capture data in existing systems, whether it's SAP or other. These, I think we need to really, nobody really gets excited by, everybody gets excited by hearing data and technology, but let's be honest, the really there's a lot of upfront, you know, hard effort required in getting data together that nobody is excited about doing, right? Nobody wants to manually enter into systems what was in spreadsheets or, I don't know, on little chits of paper, etc. But this is the reality of all businesses, small, large. We all could do much better on digital systems and data collection because we need that data, right? We need that data to make the right kinds of sustainability decisions. We need that data to track, the things that we want to see progress on. I think that there are some solutions out there, of course, but I think that there's still huge potential to build for this. But I was really quite happy to see, the ESG compass that you guys have developed, which will effectively enable companies to pull ESG data into one place from different sources of data that they already have, right? So that's a great development, and I think it can incentivize companies to the fact that something like that exists and can be used. I think it will incentivize companies to clean up the underlying systems that feed into that, right? I cannot stress the importance of doing this enough. I think beyond, there's one bit is actual, the data itself. The other piece I find equally important in ESG is the right sort of perspective and having access to different perspectives and having access to people holding up a mirror, or organizations holding up a mirror. I feel it's great. Data exists. One can do one can also do anything one wants to with data. You can make data tell the story you want it to tell, right? How does one, and of course, to remain authentic, to sort of really go to deeper and deeper levels of, transformative impact in ESG. I think it's equally important to have, a set of advisors, whether, some companies have done advisory sort of boards for ESG who challenge them, who give them this outside in view. I know we've relied on you and your team, Nitesh, quite heavily for that, in the past, to give us this outside in view, right? To go out to our stakeholders, do things like materiality assessments or double materiality assessments, to ask our stakeholders what they honestly think about our businesses from an ESG perspective, knowing full well that they're going to be much more open and honest with you than they will necessarily with us. I think that that access to organizations like yours and others who can provide different perspectives, who can hold a mirror up for us and say, hey, what about this blind spot that you seem to clearly have? You've not considered this. I think that is immensely valuable in addition to the data.
Absolutely, Gayatri. I think some great points there, and I think you balanced it well because ultimately, I think it's a complex problem to solve. Especially as you mentioned, right from cradle to cradle or farm to fork, right? Because you don't know the supply chain, the supplier's supplier, but I think as you mentioned, worth kind of chasing that, right? Because eventually that's what will build trust and really, make sure that whatever is coming our way and the data that we are leveraging for decision making is accurate and complete. So thank you, Gayatri, for that perspective and also inputs for our listeners, to kind of really think through, in a phased manner. Coming to Gayatri, the last section of our discussion today, I wanted to spend a few minutes and just get some of your learnings, challenges. What are some of the do's and don'ts that you would tell our listeners, so that they are a little bit better prepared in this complex and interconnected journey that you talked about. So what would be your key learnings that you would like to share with some of the practitioners on the call?
Yeah, no, I think for us, and we've been on this sort of structured sustainability journey for about 13 years now. Um, you know, and I'm sure that there are many organizations who've been on this structured journey much longer than us. And I'm sure they'd agree, right? I don't want to speak for them, but I can speak for us that even after 13 years, we still sometimes feel that, oh gosh, we've just touched, the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to do. There's always going to be more to do. We're always going to be able to do what we're currently doing much better. But I think the key needs to remain on the here and now. What do we need to do right now? To and how can we approach that in the most sort of simple of ways? Simple doesn't necessarily mean easy, right? But how can we approach that in the most simple of ways that is genuine and creates an impact, right? Um, ESG is, like I said, it's become so fashionable, right? To talk about ESG, to do ESG. And I think that we need to really be honest with ourselves as C-suite and as ESG professionals. Are we being authentic? Are we picking our, and I get that there's always a need to balance things, to have a few quick wins. Sure, I'm not saying we don't do that. We definitely should. But if our ESG is only about quick wins, and not really getting to the really difficult questions, right? Then I think we're doing a bit of a disservice. So I feel like that honesty of approach, hitting the difficult things, but also, investing in a few quick wins, balancing things out, is key. I think another big learning for us was that, if the whole organization doesn't play a part, then it just doesn't work. And it's not always easy, to get the whole organization to play a part. Yes, climate change impacts everybody, and it is everybody's business, but we have to be realistic as well, because people have different priorities, right? Not every single role at a company has their own set of goals, has a lot on their plate. Everybody's trying to do the best they can. So I feel like we also do need to demonstrate enough patience with our colleagues as sustainability professionals, give influence, but also give room for people to come up with their own ideas, their own contributions. I feel like, yeah, there is an urgency to the climate crisis, no doubt, but forcing people is not going to help them act more with more urgency, right? Or in the right manner. So I feel co-opting people along the journey is important. The other thing I learned quite recently was to, I'm very thankful to the person who told me this. They said, go out and, I think you need to go out and listen to the activists a little bit more, right? Because, businesses have typically, position themselves, at the opposite end of the spectrum, from activists. That being said, I think, people who are potentially the most critical of us might have the most to teach us about where we need to go and what we're not able to see about our own sustainability progress and, blind spots. So I feel really engaging with, it's always nice for people to agree, right? But that doesn't help us grow or improve. So engaging with those who disagree, potentially can unlock the most, the greatest amount of learnings and growth. So those have been a few of the things that I have learned on this sustainability path.
That's amazing, Gayatri. I love the way you talked about authenticity, because I think I also believe that a lot of time it becomes a distraction, right? Rather than focusing on the core. And I think the point that you mentioned, at times there are no easy answers. So I think collaboration is the best probably we could do. And I think this journey, or this word ESG and acronyms, alphabet soup, as I like to call, should not become a distraction. To your point. So absolutely, completely agree. The other point, Gayatri, I think that you mentioned, I think is also very, very critical. I just want to emphasize for our listeners is, talking and having an outside in view, people who are having a point of view on, from outside in, from the societal communities. I think if we listen to them more, it could serve us really well, and be a little bit empathetic towards the point that they are making, and that could give us comparative differentiation in our journey. So thank you, Gayatri, for sharing such wonderful and I would say very authentic insights on this complex journey. There are no easy answers, to your point, and this journey is obviously evolving, emerging day by day. Thank you, Gayatri, for your time and sharing with us your perspective, and would love to have you back at some point of time for our listeners to share how the journey continues to evolve and emerge. But thank you, Gayatri, for your time and the perspective.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.